Pension funds, endowments, and other institutional investors are putting more of their money into so-called hard investments, things other than stocks and bonds. Michael Russell is one of the people behind this shift. He's head of Europe at Altius Investments, a money manager and advisor to institutional investors that specializes in private equity and oversees more than $19 billion. Michael, great to have you here. Let's talk about, maybe I should preface my question by saying this. We have heard so much about gold and commodities. Clearly, those are physical assets, those are hard assets. But what you see happening and the advice that you're dispensing to some of these institutional investors has to do with another kind of hard asset. What is it that they're interested in and you're helping them understand better?
Yeah, that's right. It's not the asset itself, the hard inventory asset that gets bought and sold, traded really. What we're talking about is investing in strategies of operating with businesses that are very close to the actual resource that's produced. So it could be energy resource in terms of oil, electricity. There's also various kinds of transport resource. This is really people who are closest to the actual production, development, and delivery of infrastructure and other real assets.
So it could be wind farms, for example, could be energy, gas pipelines, things of that nature.
Those are examples.
We've also heard of, again, I call it fringe because it's just so unconventional for most people, timberland, things of that nature. What is it that institutional investors see in timberland that people didn't up until not so long ago?
Well, let's think of it a couple of different ways. First of all, it's not fringe in terms of the underlying asset. It is, to some people, it's newer in terms of the way in which the investment is structured and the kind of ownership structure in a publicly traded company as distinct from a long-term vehicle that is very much aligned with the interests of investors for the long term. So things like timber investments have been around forever. Timber investments...
But mainly by paper companies and by logging companies.
That's right. And what we found over time was that the logging companies themselves, in order to have a better, more efficient running of their capital structure, often had separate entities acquire the timberlands, and then they were more of an operator.
They focus on the cutting and the sawing and the things of that nature. Let's talk about whether or not private equity, I mean, how is this going to play into the way that private equity firms operate? Because when we talk about private equity, we typically talk about big dollar deals and leverage. Is this becoming more of a mainstream business for private equity as well?
There are some private equity firms that have an infrastructure angle to what they're doing in terms of a specific infrastructure strategy fund and team. And then there are others who, well, we watch it carefully because some of them drift into it a little bit and they're not specialists in it. So we want to keep people focused on areas where they're highly specialized. But it is an area of increasing interest to a wide range of players.
Now, is it an opportunity for private equity, given the fact that good investments are hard to make these days? You have a lot of companies with lots of cash on their balance sheets. We've heard tons about this, providing competition to private equity firms, which used to be able to get a lot of leverage and outbid these guys. That isn't available so much. So do you find private equity firms turning their attention to things that perhaps weren't in their wheelhouse a few years ago because it gives them a way to distinguish themselves?
Well, first of all, this trend toward infrastructure and real assets has been happening over the past 5 to 10 years. During that time, we've watched the extent to which it might be a little bit of a strategy drift for some people. In some cases, that has been the case. In other cases, they've set up specific teams, defined strategies, highly experienced groups that have produced the right kind of approach and results. And those are the ones that we're spending the most time with. All
right, Michael, great to have some insider's perspective on what's going on in that unusual, unfamiliar world to many of us. Thank you for joining us. Michael Russell of Altius Investments. He's head of Europe here at a firm that oversees some $19 billion of assets.